You know I'm Elle Man, and I'm here with Lale Davidson. She's a writer. She teaches writing, and she's into fabulism and magic realism. So that's my first question right off the bat. Sounds very interesting. Can I just hear what that is? And welcome to the show, and then we'll find out who the heck you are. But first, I want to know what fabulism is.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And fabulism, there's a lot of different terms for this. So one of them is unrealism. So I think fabulism comes from the word fable. So it tends to be fiction that is not exactly fantasy, but where it doesn't stay in what Western society typically considers real. So a typical example of that would be Amy Bender. You may have heard of her. She wrote The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake, and I really love her short stories. So, like in that in that novel, there's a young woman who she can intuit where the food comes from. Like whenever she eats it, she immediately sees who baked it or if it was made in a factory or whatever. So that's that kind of thing where it's happening in what we consider to be our world, but weird things are happening. Surrealism, it's related to surrealism. Magic realism is a term that was coined by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who wrote 100 Years of Solitude. And again, people are say in an ordinary town, somebody gets shot, but when they're shot, the blood comes out and it goes down the street and turns left and up the porch to its mother, to the man's mother. So it's that sort of thing where ordinary reality, where extraordinary things might happen. A little
Very
different from
interesting.
fantasy, where it's kind of a closed universe. Dragons are dragons. We expect to be, once we know that we're in the dragon universe, we expect the dragons to be there. In fabulism, it's a little unexpected.
I think I've been using surrealism wrong after listening to this. I'm actually gonna have to listen back and memorize this because I think I'm using all the words wrong. But anyway, so thank you for the great explanations. Now, who are you for our listeners and watchers?
Well, yes, my name is Lale. Davidson is spelled Lale, which looks like Lale. It's
Hmm.
Turkish. I'm not Turkish. My parents traveled a lot, and that probably influenced my interest in magic realism, which also tends to be the product of the collision of many cultures. So I've often lived outside of my culture and sort of been able to look at my culture from the outside. Um, so, yes, I've written 3 novels and a book of short stories. I've written all my life, and I teach at a community college that's part of the SUNY system.
So since you write about these things that aren't necessarily real, but what we're finding more and more, especially I think in 2024, I didn't mean to be a rhyme, that a lot of things we thought were fake or surreal or magic are actually real. I think there's going to be even more disclosure and but anyway, my question to you is now you're right about these things that are just otherworldly,
Mhm.
maybe a little magic or spiritual. What are your spiritual beliefs? Do you believe in other realms, dimensions, gods, deities?
Well, I think I find um, I'm not like a Christian or a pagan, or I don't really subscribe to one religion or another. I'm a bit of an eclecticist. So, but I do believe that one can, through meditation and things like that, connect with the all, the spirit of the universe. I guess if you had to like really pin me down and say, well, is there a God? I would say, well, I think God is is the universe. The universe is this huge, amazing thing that's beyond our comprehension, which is pretty much how we describe God. But I
Yeah,
guess it's a little different than the Christian idea where you can pray and God knows, me, Lolly Davidson. I'm not sure the universe
right,
is really aware of me, but I feel like I can connect to it if I
right. Do you
cultivate.
find, well, I had a very interesting experience. I'll just add this in. Uh, I thought I was gonna die a few weeks ago on this couch. I had a
Wow.
fever, I had an adverse reaction to an IV drip, and I prayed. All these people, religious people, FBI agent, a military doctor, different people contacted me, and I prayed to get better. And someone told me to pray to God. Now I'm almost 40, and similar to you, I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't have it all figured out. I will never walk around thinking I got it all figured out. But I prayed, and I felt wind all over my face. It felt like 20
Mhm.
people or 10 people are going like this to me. So that was one of
Wow.
the weirdest experiences of my life. It's magic and surreal, but
Yeah.
yeah, back to you.
Yeah,
So,
well, in my ghost novel, Beyond Sight, the protagonist has these kinds of experiences and she's denying them. So she's her powers are different. She sees what's inside people, sort of their energy levels, and she gets kind of a synesthesia is a term for like when you kind of mix up the senses. So she'll get a visual for the energy that she senses in them, and she's sort of denying that. And part of the plot is her learning to work with that. So, for me, I don't really need in the real world out here, I don't need an answer necessarily. Was that God? Was that
Mhm.
the energy of the people that you called in to help you? I tend to believe that more than anything, like that I do think we have an impact on each other. And I do think that and I also think that if you get out of your own way, if you get your ego out of your way, your body is very wise. It kind of knows what to do. So to me, I would say, well, you by praying, you kind of got out of your way and your body's natural healing properties took over.
Yeah,
I
wind
have
was
read books
involved.
about prayer, and one of the things
Oh,
they
interesting.
say is
Okay.
don't pray for something specific, like don't
Okay.
pray for your fever to go down, pray for
Oh,
healing,
right.
and the right thing will happen.
That's what I did. And
Yeah.
I said I actually interviewed a psychic, June Edward, a couple days ago, and I said, I'm considerate. So I said, yeah, if it's meant to be, if I'm meant to be healed, then please, heal me. And
Right.
I said, then I will not doubt the present. So I made all these promises and I had a conversation with God. It was very interesting. But it
Yeah.
relates to ghosts and other worlds or God or ancestors or who knows. But you, this ghost story is different. Could you tell us about how
Yes,
this
well,
story
the
is
plot,
different?
I'll read you part of the blurb. So, in
Right.
scenic Saratoga Springs, which is where I live, ghosts of a dark capitalist past awaken and challenge a young woman's powers. So Julie Sykes is a young woman with long repressed supernatural powers, and she's inextricably drawn to the enigmatic Damien Quinn. But when a malignant spirit possesses him, she must unlock her powers to save him. And there's a kind of a murder mystery in here. There's the mystery of like, what is possessing him and how the hell is she going to get this thing out of him? Like, first, she has to figure out what it is. But there's also the mystery of something has happened to her father, and her father who has passed away 13 years prior. And he is an adept. He's somebody with these supernatural powers also. And he's honed them. And he's been drawn to Saratoga Springs because, we have this fault in our city that goes right down the center, like a literal fault of, and so all these evanescent springs are come up to the surface, and for hundreds of years have been purported to have healing powers. A lot of them have things like calcium in them and other minerals that are good for you. And um, so, anyways, this guy is drawn to Saratoga Springs, and he is haunted by the spirit of somebody, Henry Hilton, who's actually a real historical figure. And so I think what makes my ghost story different, I mean, there's the murder mystery, there's the mystery of who are the ghosts and how can we deal with them. But I really try to deal with the energetic world. So I bring in a lot of different, like a little Chinese medicine, a little feng shui, a little, um,
Interesting.
kind of local. I interviewed some psychics and I read a lot about paranormal psychology. And so it wasn't just like, ooh, spooky, there's a ghost, run away. It was like, okay,
Right.
how does my energy affect the ghost or the spirit, and how do they affect me? And why can some spirits speak and some can't? And why are some little white orbs and etc.
Very interesting. I didn't really believe in a lot of this stuff, and my mom did. So I bumped into a guy at the grocery store, and long story boring, or actually not very boring. I studied psychic development.
Ooh,
I took, I think, three full psychic development courses, and two of them are taught by, I know one of them is taught some very famous psychics in Long Island. So technically,
nice.
I'm a trained psychic, and I've heard told such real life crazy stories about almost everything you're talking about. So my
Yeah.
question to you is, Why would you write about possession, or do you have any experiences with possession or thoughts? Maybe this person's possessed, or was it just an anecdote you made up? Mm.
Yeah, I mean that, no, I've never experienced that, but I always wanted to believe in ghosts. Like
Oh,
I'm a skeptic by nature. So, and being an academic, we're very much into seeing the evidence. So, and
hmm
I do think that just, one shouldn't just believe whatever you want because that can lead you terribly, terribly astray. But
yeah.
um, that said, of course, there are things beyond our understanding. We're not all knowing, and the universe is huge. And with the psychic, so I've had my own little experiences of, like when my grandmother died, she lived with us, and I was 10, and I really felt I didn't get to say goodbye to her, and I really wanted her to come back.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't, to my knowledge, but I did have some sort of strange supernatural experiences of, hearing footsteps and things like that. And so for me, the thought of ghosts is kind of a comforting thought. And then I became a fan of ghost stories. Personally, I think the psychic element is just really, really good intuition. You can
hmm
read people, and some people are better at reading people than others. And it's amazing what you can tell from a person from the outside because our brains are very, very smart. Even if you didn't maybe get an A in school, nevertheless, our intuition is very, very fast.
hmm
Malcolm Gladwell wrote a wonderful book called Blink about just rapid cognition and how powerful it is. So, I've done also experiments with my students where I had them do a little, have them observe each other before they just in the first class where they observe each other and they just take notes on what is the person wearing and, what kind of shoes do they have? How are they
hmm
sitting? And then I asked them to answer a bunch of questions that there's no way they should be able to know the answer to, like how many
Right.
siblings does this person have? Are their parents happily married? And I expected the answers to be mostly wrong. And what I found was the opposite. Most of the
hmm
students were getting most of the answers right. And so,
Interesting.
yeah, so that became actually the proof of just how smart our intuition is if you pay attention to it.
Well, maybe you should teach psychic development because that's a very typical run-of-the-mill basic B exercise. And the last time I did it, someone was visiting in town. I don't do this psychic development stuff. I did it for like 2 years, and then you have other
Mhm.
things to do. But the last time I did it, I started crying
Mhm.
reading this woman. Turns out she lost her son years ago, and there's a deep void every day because you lose a child.
Wow.
I've never lost a child. But back
Yeah.
to you. So we're gonna wrap up in about 2 minutes. Now, can you tell us about the hybrid genre trend? And I always talk about hybrid genres and mixing genres. So let's hear it from you.
Yeah, well, it's I think it's become much more popular where people are blending all kinds of genres. So it used to be that, realism was the dominant genre, that if you wanted to be a serious literary writer, you had to write straight up realism.
Yeah.
Um, science fiction and fantasy were considered lesser. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
even taught in schools.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've been seeing is that more and more people are blending the genres. So you'll see magical elements. You'll see science fiction blended with fantasy. You'll see realism blended with fantasy or with science fiction.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and you'll see more playing with the forms. So that has become much more common and much more accepted. And I'm glad to see that.
Too. Yeah, me
Mhm.
too. I'm like that with music. I love when they mix 80s and rap, like
Yeah.
Depeche Mode or Devo. And I just worked with an artist who has one of my favorite songs. He mixed Devo and rap, and I'm just like, oh, this is my favorite. And every time
Mhm.
we talk about movie production, well, you can see back here. If you're watching a video, every time we do video, if I'm collaborating with anyone, I'll always try to explain this hybrid genre, mixing genres. So
Yeah.
we're at the end. These are very quick interviews. Could you tell our listeners where to find you, all your socials, website, everything, whatever you want us
Yeah.
to
Well,
know?
if you search me on, first of all, I have a website,
Mm,
laledavidson.com. So again, Lale, Davidson with like David and son of David.
mm,
com. But also, if you search me in Barnes and Nobles or any place books are sold, or you can also order books from the bookstore, which is very good for the bookstores. So I'm a little harder to find in Amazon because they keep changing my name to Lake Davidson.
What?
But so it's a little harder to find me there. But go to Barnes.
Lale's much cooler.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, very
That's
nice
it.
to meet you. Thank you so much.
Instagram or Facebook?
Yes, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook also. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. This was one of the quickest interviews it felt like ever.
Thank you.
Well, I guess on that note, back to you, Mark, in the studio. See you later.